Welcome to the Bourbon and Brands podcast, where we have simple conversations with successful people over a glass of our favorite brown spirit, bourbon. What's going on, Matt?
Man, just admiring your room. So it's an impressive room. I'm jealous.
Well, this is, believe it or not, just a very, very small slice of the collection. I don't like all my bottles being up here because I'm, not up here all the time. Yeah. And so I keep a lot at home, but at the same time, I got to have a little bit of flash up here, a little bit of good stuff. So people come on the show, they get to try some stuff they want to try. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's nice. Like I said earlier, I saw your list of what you had and kind of overwhelmed me a little bit. So I'm glad you narrowed it down. It looks good.
Well, you picked a good array of options. You wanted to go Four Roses.
I did, because I've never actually had it, which is a shame. But I figured let's start with that.
Yeah. So, Four Roses is one of those things that one of those brands that's really historic. It's been around for, some people say early 1800s, but at least 1888. One of the oldest brands in American whiskey, kind of the history of it, which it's been owned by several places, owned by Seagram's, which dang near drove it in the ground in the early 50s and 60s. Okay. Being a Canadian whiskey, they made it basically a blended, they marketed it as a blended whiskey, which wasn't very popular in the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. It was the big vodka, gin, wine, beer era. So whiskey got a lot of hate kind of in those decades. And so it's very, very lucky to be around today. A guy named Jim Rutledge, who's kind of whiskey royalty, master distiller, came on board with Four Roses in the mid 1990s, I think 95, kind of was a part of getting another brand to buy Four Roses, take it back to being a true bourbon. And so here it is today, one of the strongest options out there, really good stuff. And one of the most interesting things to me about Four Roses is they have actually 10 different recipes. And most distilleries, they're going to have like 2 or 3 mash bills. Yeah. And that's really what they stick with. But they've got five different yeast strains, 2 different mash bills. So that gives them the ability for 10 different recipes. And so in this option, their standard kind of flagship, lower end bourbon, they're kind of been around forever. It's got basically every one of those recipes in there. It's just kind of a mashup of everything. Then we've got the small batch select over here. And that is, I believe, I might get this wrong and I'm going to be so embarrassed if I listen back to this and realize that I was wrong, but I think that is mash bill E and single barrel is mash bill B. Now B being the higher rye of the two. I think it's a 35% rye and this is a 20% rye. So still both in my mind a high rye, but they call this a low rye. This one's a high rye. And so do you typically like a high rye content in yours? I mean, that's where you get the spicy, the peppery, kind of the back of the throat type taste.
No, it's funny because the fact that I've never had this is probably a little bit of an indictment on me, but I'm very much a creature of habit. Yeah. So I find something, I like it, and then I stay there. So when I first got into bourbon and whiskey, stumbled around, got into Weller's, loved Weller's, and just bought Weller's, and I would buy Weller's, and then all of a sudden showed up and there was no more Weller's, and I couldn't get any Weller's at this liquor store, couldn't get it here. So moved on, and then the same thing happened to me with Basil Hayden. Got into that, and but recently here in the last few months, I have been kind of sticking my toe a little bit into the rye, and I really, really like it. Okay. Just for what, like you said, for after, you get away from a little of the sweetness, I guess, and you move more into that kind of more peppery kind of taste. So it's been something that I've been in, and of course I started with Basil Hayden's rye because I'm a creature of habit and not very adventurous. But so when this came up, I was like, hey, this should be something that we should put on the list.
Yeah, for sure, because these are what I consider high rise, the single barrel for sure, because it is that mash bill E or B, and it's got the higher rye content, 35%, which is a lot. And I'm not usually like a super high rye guy. I like, to me, kind of that sweet spot is like that 20% type 25 to 30% is kind of where I like to be. But all of Four Roses offerings are pretty amazing to me. I'm not a huge fan of the lower end, just because it's again just kind of a conglomeration of all the recipes. It's really hard to pick out any really one note to me in that, because everybody's palate's different, but that's just my experience with it. But
so did you? I mean, obviously you knew I told you yesterday we were going to have. Is this something that you just know, or is that something like, hey, I like to know this, or do you just kind of like, hey, I call it any whiskey and I can kind of give you, the background and all? I mean, that's impressive.
Well, it's not. I couldn't do it with every whiskey, that's for sure. But over the last probably, I would say 6 to 8 months, I've really been trying to dig deeper into what makes these whiskeys different, because I like to know that. If you have a big collection, I'm starting to expand my palate a little bit. I'm starting to be able to pick out different flavors and different notes about the different whiskeys that I have, and I can kind of get them regionally, as far as this came from Bardstown, or this came from Buffalo Trace, or this came from Tennessee, or whatever it is. And so it's one of those things I enjoy. I'm definitely just getting started. So don't test me too hard on that, because I probably would fail. But when it came to Four Roses, I knew we'd be talking about it today. I knew a little bit of the history with Jim Rutledge. And so I just thought that I could kind of share a couple of those things just to kind of put it to light for you. And,
I like it.
And as we taste them, hopefully you'll be able to kind of pick out a little bit of that difference in that rye content. But man, I want to get into kind of a little bit of your story, because we met, it's probably been 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Matt Lewis is a part of the founding members of League Real Estate that started right here in Fort Worth, Texas. And so just an amazing story, and what you all have done in the first, what has it been, 5 years or 4 years?
I mean, I think we started January 2017, so this will be our fifth year.
This will be the fifth year.
Fifth full year, going into our sixth,
I remember sitting down, and I knew Jeff before I knew you, Jeff Anderson. And so I remember sitting down with Jeff, and Jeff calling me, and we got together, I think, for lunch, and he was just saying, hey, kind of got this idea, what do you think about it? And he's like, I got a buddy named Matt and Luke, and we've been kind of throwing around this idea, trying to put it to paper and see what it would look like. And I was all excited about it, because it was just different than what real estate was doing in DFW. And I was like, man, this is an amazing opportunity for these guys. I know they're going to knock it out of the park, because it's just such a cool concept. So first of all, congrats on making it this far, and the success that y'all have had. I mean, League, from my experience in Tormax, League is kind of one of those brokerages that the other brokerages kind of talk about a little bit. They're like, hey, we want to start doing that stuff that League's doing. We want to look that way. We want to have that vibe, and it's just such a cool niche that y'all found, and the vibe you got is amazing. So, tell me about kind of those early conversations, and what was it that you were really pinpointing was the void in the market, and where your heads were at. Yeah, no,
I kind of wish it was that easy. Maybe I really don't think we had any idea what this thing was going to look like or where it was going to go. I mean, honestly, it started because my wife and Luke, who's one of our partners as well, our kids happened to be in the same class at school, and they came over to eat dinner one night at our house. I didn't know Luke, and he was working for another brokerage here in town, and they so of course I was not even really working in the real estate industry at the time, but we got to talking, and he kind of made an offhand joke. He was like, hey, why won't you just start your own real estate company? And I was like, I don't want to do that. That sounds terrible. Why would I want to do that? But it kind of stuck with me a little bit. And so the next week I called him, and I was like, hey, let's go eat. And I was kind of in a place where I wasn't doing much. We had just sold out of another kind of idea that we had that hadn't gone very well. So kind of happy to be shedding that life and kind of looking for the next thing. And we both had a common friend, and that was Jeff, who we were talking about earlier. And Jeff, wonderful, fantastic real estate agent. And Jeff worked at the same brokerage Luke was at, and Jeff and I just happened to have lived on the same street. Yeah. So he was, 8, 9 houses down from me. So we both knew Jeff. And as we got to talking, I was like, you know what? I think if Jeff wanted to do this with us, I think it might actually work, because I feel like he kind of what we're talking about here is like he's the third piece. And Luke was like, well, funny you say that because Jeff and I have been talking about doing this for years, but we could never actually get it done because, you know, we felt like we needed another piece. So it really was, I feel like, very much the God ordained kind of, hey, this is something that y'all should probably look at. So so I mean, honestly, we just kind of went to lunch one day at Central Market and sat upstairs and we're like, all right, what do you think? And we probably spent 3 hours on what we were going to name it and like 20 minutes on, you know, what it would look like. But that's, you know, kind of how we launched. And so we started kind of storyboarding. We went through the typical probably iterations that you do. But one of the things we did that was really helpful was we started off kind of via Donald Miller's storyboarding thing, which I had never done before. I had read some of his books, but never his marketing books, more of his Blue Like Jazz type books and things like that. So, but it was familiar to me and it really resonated. And I think that kind of galvanized us. Is like, hey, I think we all three kind of have similar values, similar outlook. And I think we're all kind of pointing in the same direction. So we took off.
That's awesome, man. And you did take off. It took off quick out the gates. How many agents did y'all have on board by the end of the first year? Do you remember? I feel like it was and here's the thing that's interesting about it is that, you know, at least from my conversations with y'all, it wasn't like something that you're very strategic in the agents that you allow. It was like they were interviewing you were interviewing them to see if they fit, right? It was a very specific culture you were going for, very specific agent profile that you were looking for, and personalities and character, high values, all those things. And so the fact that you've grown so large so quickly while still maintaining that has got to have been a challenge, but also a blessing in the same time. So like, how does that work?
It was, honestly, I was probably the biggest problem with that because I wish I could take credit. Really, there was a big push-pull with us, and that kind of exists to this day, and I think it's to our credit that it works so well. But that was mainly Jeff. So Jeff had a vision for the culture. He had a vision for the type of agent he wanted to represent us. And I was more the guy sitting back there going, if we don't start getting people here, we're going to go out of business and we're not going to make any money. And so we need to just kind of get this thing going. Like, let's get people in the door. And that was me. And I was very short-sighted in that. Like I wasn't looking at, hey, this is where we're going. And the 50,000 foot view looks like this. I got way too into the weeds of just like, hey, my pro forma doesn't look very good right now. We need to fix this. And to his credit, he held firm. And so we did a really, really good job of kind of ferreting out who we were through those first kind of 4 or 5 months of meeting with people. Because we had people show up that from a financial point of view would have been very, very helpful for our company. It would have been like, hey, this is great. Like, this is, you know, if he plugs in here, it's going to look like this. When, you know, that's gonna add this to our production. It's gonna add this to our revenue. It'll be wonderful. But he didn't, or she didn't, fit with the overall brand and culture we were trying to build.
Right. Yeah.
And so we had to make those hard decisions in the beginning where you're not making any money, and you say, oh my gosh, there's money to be made here, and you have to say no with this vision on where you're going. And that took me a while to get. I was the last one to come around on that, to be honest. And I was wrong. And they were right. And it started to play out that once we kind of hit that corner and we started to get a few people that not only were good at what they did, but kind of also resonated with who we were and the kind of brand and kind of impact we were trying to make with people, then it just, that compounded over and over again. And it became, how are we gonna get people in here to, oh my gosh, now people actually want to come here. And it was a really cool thing to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, in short, I was the problem. I learned my lesson, and it was to our benefit that I didn't win that argument.
And that's, I don't think that you would be alone by any means when you look at entrepreneurs trying to grow a business in any industry where they need a team. The gut reaction is, I've got a bunch of work I got to get done and I need help. So I just need to get people in here to do the job. And they think about culture last, you know, they think about production first, culture last. And I feel like there's a lesson to be learned there, and you learned that lesson. And I love hearing that, because there's a balance where you're trying to, like, especially in the real estate, because every agent you bring in is more revenue. And it's not like you already have work and that you need them to do the work like any other kind of industry. But so there's that balance of needing people, but also needing the right people.
Right.
And so that can be difficult, but you guys have done an amazing job at that over these last 4 or 5 years of bringing in the right kind of people, because every time that you make that announcement on Facebook, hey, welcome so-and-so join the team. I'm like, of course they did. Like they're a league person. There's league agents out there, and then there's real estate agents. And it's like when one of them joins league, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Just because of, if you know them, and it's just it's a cool thing. So what is it that you would say about league is the culture? How do you explain the culture that you've built there?
Oh, that's a hard question. So I think really what we're looking for, the word we toss around a lot is authenticity, because it's really, really difficult, particularly in a sales heavy environment, which is what we do, right? I mean, we're sales. We need, you have to sell to make it in this business. And that goes without saying, but there is a way that you can carry yourself while you're doing the job that we do, that can come off as very authentic or very cynical or a little bit predatory. And it doesn't take long, really, after interviewing hundreds of people over the last 5 years, to kind of see the markers of people who are a whole lot more authentic in what they want versus people who have kind of values that maybe diverge from ours. So really, we look for people who are kind of grounded in their life, in their family. We look for people who are financially motivated, but they also understand that the big win financially comes from satisfied, happy clients. And they understand not the burden, I want to say, but maybe the large responsibility of, hey, when you're with us, there's 65 agents at our company now, and then 25 in Burleson. So we're all linked, and we all kind of fly under the same flag, right? And so what you do does affect me, and it affects the person in Burleson you don't know, and it affects the client of that person. So some people get that, and some people, they get it, but they don't care. And those are the people that we've kind of learned, like, hey, that's probably not our people, right? They kind of are able to say, I want what's best for me, but I also know that there's a little bit more responsibility here with our people. So that's been something I think we key on a little bit for that. I do like to think that all of our people are very authentic with what they do and what they want. And I do think that they really, really do care that what they do is well and right, and that their people are happy.
Yeah. And what do you, and plus it doesn't hurt that you have really cool office spaces. So what do you think about the new building? You got a new building y'all are moving into in the next couple months, right?
Yeah.
And it's right there off of 30?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's right off of 30 in Merrick. It's actually, if you're a Fort Worth person, it's right across from Uncle Julio's. And it's a 1893. It was the third house ever built in Arlington Heights. Wow. So there's two others. I would botch the names, but one of them's over there by Byers, kind of by Rivercrest, and I don't know where the first one is. But we were the third house built, and it's kind of neat how we came up with it, because the space we're in now, we were outgrowing. We didn't own it. We knew we wanted to go somewhere else, and Jeff was like, man, that open breakfast across the freeway, that'd be cool. Like, that'd be a cool office. And I'm like, man, once again, I'm like, Jeff, that's not a good idea. Like, that thing's old, and but it turns out that Jeff had a connection with somebody who used to own the building, and we were able to get in contact with the bed and breakfast owners, and it really was, again, kind of a almost God ordained. We went and met with them, and 2 days later the deal was done. I mean, it just like everything hit, and we walked through it, and we're like, this is it. This is going to work. Yeah, let's do it. And so we are about a week away from moving in.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow,
so it's been fun. So we've done quite a bit. It's a 130-year-old house. So it's got a lot of quirks, but it also has a lot of cool things too.
So, yeah. Rumor has it, speaking of cool things, all the rooms had heart-shaped tubs in them. So does your office still have a heart-shaped tub?
The heart-shaped tubs, unfortunately, they found a better place.
Oh my gosh. So, I can't believe you didn't just keep one in your office, or maybe throw one in Jeff's and surprise him.
You know what's funny is when we did the deal, deal. The heart-shaped tubs were actually in the contract that the owners got to keep them. Of everything in that house, the one thing they wanted were the 6 heart-shaped Dumb and Dumber, Harry and Lloyd tubs. So,
and that's why it took 2 days. It would have been a 12-hour deal, but we were fighting over the heart-shaped tubs.
We had to value those tubs, right? And those things sit outside for 2 months, and then eventually they came and just threw them away because they couldn't find anybody that would ship them to Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh!
I think the cost to ship them was more than it was those were worth. But the heart-shaped tubs, unfortunately, had to go.
Man.
But yeah,
can we? So can someone still show up there and get breakfast at least? Not the bed part, but can we?
Yeah. I mean, you probably have better luck getting a bed than breakfast in that place. So, but yeah, no, I think the couches may pull out. So maybe we can do the bed part.
Maybe that could work. Man, that building from the pictures looks super awesome, and the building you're coming from is a historic kind of piece in West Fort Worth as well.
It was the first school in Arlington Heights. So basically the first school out of the core downtown area. So it's also a pre-1900s building, and it was a one-room schoolhouse, and it's been kind of added on to over the years. But one of the local title companies in town gave us this, I guess from a book, found this old picture of a bunch of students standing out in front of our building from the early 1900s. And so it was really neat to see what the building looked like, and it was in a prairie. I mean, there was nothing there at the time, we've kind of bounced around the original buildings in Arlington Heights a little bit.
Yeah. So what is it about? I mean, you have the option to go, hey, let's just go build a building, right? And so what is it about like that nostalgia that like, because that, to me, that fits the league culture, right? That kind of reviving what we already have, pouring into Fort Worth, making it better and not just building on top of it. So really, what is it about like that decision? I know you guys were outgrowing. So what made you look for a building as opposed to like building something that actually fits exactly your needs?
Yeah, no, we've always loved the idea of a real estate office in a house. Like to me, there's just something about that was something that resonated with all three of us. It was like a real estate office in a house. It feels right, first off. So we always loved that. But second, really, we kind of wanted our office space to feel more like home than it does like an office. So with that layout, you're able to come in and we have an actual functional living room, and it's right next to the kitchen. And it makes a whole lot of sense because if we're meeting with clients or a potential agent or just having a meeting, is a whole different kind of environment of meeting in a living room versus meeting in a conference room, right? Which we have a conference room too, but those two things kind of are different. If we're doing a closing and we need docs and a notary, that's a conference room. But if we're having hey, what kind of house do you want? Well, what can we do for you? Where are you in the process? That's a living room discussion, right? And so we have a living room. And that's great. And then for our people, it's kind of the same thing where it feels homey, and then there's desks, but they're built into the flow of the house. Yeah. So it feels like not an office, but a house with office space in it. Yeah. I guess is the best way to describe it.
So awesome, man. I love it, dude. I'm so excited and stoked for what y'all got going on. And one thing that is clear that anybody can recognize is that the marketing approach of League is just different. Okay. It's very much an in-house feel, and that's on purpose, is really making sure that what we're doing on social media is like decided by us. It's not some big corporate decision or some outside company that's not even around here is making those decisions, which is the case for a lot of brokerages, where you can tell their social media is full of just generic homeowner type posts, right? Yeah. And League has a very much different feel on social. And so this is probably more of a discussion for Luke, but I would love to get your insight on what those conversations are like behind those closed doors of, hey, how are we going to be different on social media? So,
I wish Luke was here to get that, because Luke's special. I mean, he's a creative, and I'm not, but that's very much his lane. But from the very beginning, I think the reason why Luke decided to do League is because he saw something that at his previous brokers that he really thought would work, and they wouldn't let him do it.
Oh yeah.
And so he took that energy and was like, hey, let's do that here, which was very much an engagement of people where they're at. So our kind of mantra going in was, hey, let's not do print, right? Print's expensive. Print doesn't stick. You can't track print. You take your picture, you throw it in the magazine. and the people at the dentist office see it and then they put it down.
Right.
But if we can get a really, really heavy presence socially and we can engage with our people and feel more like a part of Fort Worth, like we're part of here. Like, I mean, even some of these brands, you know, that you see in Fort Worth that are TX and some of these guys who have such they're so part of the culture here and people recognize that, and you see it like, oh yeah, you know, their distillery took on the old golf course. Like, we kind of wanted to be that, right? That's really what we want to do, is like, that's League, they're Fort Worth, right? That's they're a part of that. And so that was kind of all digital, all social media, and the focus was really like, hey, we want to tether ourselves to this really cool city that we live in, that we feel like is one of the most underrated cities in the country to live in. Yeah. And let's say, hey, we're for Fort Worth, and we're local, we live here, and it just kind of took off from there. And we really did. We're fortunate. We had great partners from the get-go. I know you mentioned Tourmax has been part of us since day one. Mm-hmm. I mean, we still work with you guys that's been a great partnership for us media-wise.
Cool, thanks.
We've got good vendors that do everything from print to video, and they've been super loyal, and we've been super loyal to them. And I feel like you get those good relationships, and they give and take, and it works. And so we depend on the right people, I guess that's the best way to put it. Yeah,
and it's kind of a branch out of the agents have to absolutely fit your mold and your culture, but also your vendors and who you use. I know that being a big conversation and an ongoing conversation in the very beginning. For the first several years, Tourmax I had with Luke of just consistently coming up with the product that you guys desired. Yeah. And kind of custom fitting what we do to your specific outlook and what you wanted your presence to look like. And so I think that's where the key is, the gold nugget on how, of course it's the people, but how League has really emerged as a front runner, kind of like the go-to brokerage in Fort Worth is that culture that's developed, that starts from the top with y'all all the way down through the agents and through the vendors. Through the vendors is important. And so based on that, do you see, it's so focused Fort Worth, and I know you have location in Arlington or Aledo, have a place out there. Johnson County has kind of started moving and grooving down here in Burleson. So, I mean, you could still consider those DFW, but do you ever see League kind of branching out further, even outside of Texas? Is that even an option, do you think?
I don't think so. I think because of, really our heartbeat is really for not only DFW, but really Fort Worth in particular. And now with us kind of being in Burleson, being in Aledo, we're really more like the Westaplex, right? Like, we really, really feel like, again, I said it earlier, I feel like we're one of the most underrated places to live in the country. I mean, I think that's something that people who live here come to find out. It's like, oh, this place is great, and it's got everything that I need from a big metro area, but it feels very small and
got the schools
connected, and it's got the schools and you're just not that far removed from everybody else. It doesn't take long living here to think, oh yeah, we're two people away. We all kind of move in the same worlds, which is really very endearing for a city, right? You don't feel so lost. And so I feel like we like where we're at. We love Fort Worth. And so I think most of our kind of future growth efforts stem around anything Tarrant and Tarrant adjacent. I mean, we really don't have any plans for Dallas. We really don't have any plans for moving into Waco or Oklahoma City. I think anything we do would very much center on, hey, where are the underserved markets of Fort Worth that we're not doing the best we could? Is that north? Is that northeast? Is that Arlington, Mansfield, where we've talked about all those places, but it'd be Tarrant, Parker, Johnson, maybe Denton. But I feel like really that there's so much to do here. Yeah. DFW is the fourth largest metroplex or metro area in the country. I mean, there's plenty to do right in our own backyard.
Yeah, and we've had the very exact same conversations in Tourmax of like, hey, how can we duplicate what we're doing here everywhere else? And what we've come to kind of conclude, and trying a few and failing, is like, we don't need to duplicate what we do here. We need to duplicate what we do here.
Yeah, exactly.
Again and again and again, because there's just so much opportunity. I mean, I forget, last count was like 25,000 agents, registered agents in DFW. I mean, there's just so much opportunity. And the real estate has just been booming, which has been crazy. What have your thoughts been over the pandemic, and like how it's just actually picked up steam during a global pandemic. The housing market just blew up. I know you had to change technology a little bit and kind of do things differently, but what's been your take on that?
Man, Wes, it's been a really fun time to live here. Like, living in Fort Worth through the last 7 or 8 years. I mean, I moved here in 2003. So I've been here almost 20 years, and the city I moved to and the city is now, I mean, it's so different. But in the pandemic, I remember distinctly, we were in Santa Fe, my wife and I, and then Luke, one of our partners, and his wife, Lindsay, and then our kids. And we were off the grid. We knew nothing, man. And so we drive back in and cell phones kick in. It's like, hey, there's no school next week. Kids are pumped, and we drive on and kids are pumped. And and then we end up getting a call from Jessica's sister, and they're like, hey, you should stop in Amarillo for food, because I'm in Costco and I'm like standing at the back of the store. It's kind of nuts here. So
wow,
we didn't know. And so I distinctly remember walking into our office that Monday after Thanksgiving. I was the only one there, thinking like, oh my gosh, this like may all be over. Yeah. Right. Like, and not just us, but like a lot of people, guys like y'all, a lot of people who are service providers, and you're like, man, is anybody going to buy a house? Because it seems, the world shut down. We're sheltering in place. Like, how does this look? And it was honestly one of the biggest surprises of my life that in March, I think we had 30% of our contracts in escrow cancel in a week. So probably 90 to 100 contracts in escrow to close. And then within 3 days, 30 of them, people just left. That's scary.
Yeah.
And then, we went the month of March with like 2 deals. And, normally we average 80 to 100 a month, and there's 2.
Wow.
Like, okay. How long can we do this? By May, we were up 25%.
Oh my gosh.
So how that happened, and if anybody, remembers what it was like here in Fort Worth, summer 2020 to spring 20, it was madness. And so we went from like, are we going to make it, to how are we going to service all these people? And how are we going to do this, with wearing masks or not, or virtual or whatever. So it was honestly, that leading through COVID was one of the hardest things we've had to do.
How much of it was people just sitting at home and looking around their house and getting sick of their house and just wanting a new house?
Man, if in the last year, if you had a pool and some land, like, you did well.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of folks that were sitting around over by where I live, which is in the south side of Fort Worth, where we got like 50-foot lots, and they're like, man, we need a pool, we need some land, and because we need out.
I swear that's probably why that's got to be a major part of the boom of 2020 that summer, is people sat in their houses literally for 3 months straight, worked from home, realized, I don't have a home office, I need a pool, my kids are driving me crazy, there's nowhere for them to go, we need an extra bedroom, and all these things are happening, and they're looking around at their house, they're becoming dissatisfied, and it's like, it's time to sell.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like, what's the great thing about living in like a metro urban area, right? It's like, I'm close to bars, I'm close to restaurants, there's a lot going on, in 5 minutes I can be here. Well, all that stuff's taken from you. Now it's like, well, it's cramped and crowded, and there's nothing to do.
Right.
Why am I here? Let's go out there where we can, spread out and have a pool and, have a yard we can move around in. So there's a big move there. And honestly, office space is changing and people are just working different. So a lot of people looked up and said, hey, I think for the long term, I can not go into the office, or I don't need my office space. And so let's shut the office space down and get a bigger house. So there was a lot of people that reconfigured their lives in the last 18 months, which included their living arrangements, which really, really spurred kind of that big boom that we had.
Yeah, a buddy of mine works for Frito-Lay. I think it's in Plano or Frisco. I can't remember the two, but their office was there, and he lives in Alvarado, right down the road from me. And he had to drive there. He's worked there for years and had to drive there every day. It was just his commute. And when the pandemic hit, he was office from home. And what was that, 2.5 years ago? He still has not gone back to the office. They've just said, hey, you don't need to come back to the office anymore.
Just do what you're doing.
Do what you're doing. He checks in once a month. He goes to the office once a month. And I'm like, man, that could have saved you so much.
Oh, yeah, but that changes his life, right? Now it's like, hey, my 2-hour commute's gone, so I've got all this time back.
Oh, my gosh.
So when you hit a huge life shift like that, selling a house and changing doesn't seem that unreasonable, right? You're like, well, the whole thing's been upended. Might as well follow the trend and move into it. And I think that happened to a lot of people.
The dude is in New Mexico all the time. Yeah. Like him and his family, especially during the summer, those couple summers there, his family just load up in the RV and head off to New Mexico for like months at a time. Yeah. And it's like, man, there's something cool about that. For a lot of people, that's where they found themselves.
Maybe he wants to hire us. We go, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good gig.
Yeah. So in looking at kind of the competition, I guess, around DFW, because like you said, there's a ton of opportunity, but there's also a ton of competition. Even though as league has kind of set themselves apart and they're kind of doing things a little differently, where do you see other brokerages kind of getting it wrong? And let's go one of two places. Okay. First, let's answer, where do they get it wrong in what they offer their agents, and where do they get it wrong on how they market, like how their marketing approach and how their online presence.
Okay.
So let's go with the first one.
Good questions.
Where do you think other brokerages get it wrong when it comes to their team?
All right. So I'm probably giving you a lot of long answers. This one may be even longer than usual.
We've got plenty of time.
Okay, good. Yeah. So when it comes to agents, I mean, the way real estate brokerages work is your revenue is almost completely driven by your agent sales. So really, I think for the longest time, brokerages looked at their agents in more of a light of an employee almost, or it's like, it's great that you're here. We love having you here, but here's how we do things. Here's what we want from you. More the way a boss would talk to an employee. It's like, I'm the broker, you're the agent. So this is the authority we want to give to you. And this is, and I think that was a accepted dynamic in the world 20 years ago. But in the way that kind of the people look for real estate now, the digital age that came on us with, Zillow and listings online, the agent all of a sudden didn't need those things from the brokerage anymore. They needed the package they wanted from the broker became different, right? And so really our approach from the very, very beginning was, hey, the agent is our customer and we are a servant leadership organization. So we looked at our people and said, all right, we're not going to publish your sales. We're not going to have a monthly meeting that says, hey, Janie, you're number 2 in the company. Here's your plaque. And, sorry, Steve, you're 30. You need to get going and stand up here and let us talk to you about why you're not doing well. Yeah. It's, hey, what are your goals? Why are you in this business? Where do you want to be? Let us help you get there. Yeah. How does that look? So if you want to sell 40 houses a year, great. If you want to sell 5, that's great. Let's talk about how you get there, right? And how we can support you. Yeah. And so we really, really look at our agents as our customers, and then by extension, their customers are our customers. So that's really the approach we take with them is look at them like, all right, what do you need? We are here to help you succeed. You need to market yourself better. All right, let's sit down and talk about what that looks like. You need help legally, contractually. You have a tough client. You have a tough situation. Your business is down 30% from last year. Like, let us meet you where, and because we're the size we are, that allows us to engage with our people. You've got 700 agents in a brokerage. It gets really difficult to know like, oh, that's, Sam, and Sam's having a great year. With us being the size that we are, I know exactly what all my people are doing. I know who's doing better than last year, who's doing worse, who had a hard deal, who had a great month. And so I'm able to engage them on that level and be like, hey, let me just tell you, you're doing wonderful, man. Like, what is it? Like, what happened this year from last year? Let's talk about that so we can share with others. So I feel like more than anything with our people, if you were to reach out to them, they'd probably tell you, like, that's kind of our heartbeat is how we're here as your kind of diving board. Like, you spring off of us, we're your support, we're your infrastructure, but we're not going to tell you what kind of flip to do. And I'm not going to tell you how to do your business. If you want to do your business cold calling and following up on expired listings, that's great. If you don't want to ever pick up the phone and just go volunteer at your church and try to make relationships and ultimately gain clients that way, that's great. You just have a strategy and we'll help you execute it. So I think that's question 1. Yeah. I think question 2 kind of goes down that line with the way, unfortunately, our industry is in a very entrenched industry. And so because of that, practices continue on long after they work, but people don't know what else to do. Yeah. So it's like, well, we have to market, we have to advertise. But instead of really sitting down and thinking like, how can we do that well? Like, well, we just need to get it done. And so get a bunch of houses, get the ad, put it in the magazine, get somebody to post something on the internet 3 days a week. Oh, we need to get an Instagram account. Okay, that's great. Somebody do the Instagram account. And it's something that it is a has to versus this is our really, especially what we do, our ultimate opportunity to connect with people. So I think us coming in and being like, all right, we're going to be like half a bubble off. We're not a market disruptor. We're not going to change the industry, but we can do things a little bit better.
Yeah.
So when we market to people, we're going to market to them directly. We're going to go directly through our social channels, directly through reviews, directly through those kind of things, and hit people where they're at and be an engaged group with our clients versus being a, hey, you know, signs up, ads in the paper, we're done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, from the very day we opened, Luke was on staff as a full-time marketing person. We didn't have a single agent, but that's how important that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a game changer in both of those answers as far as, and that's one thing I've seen in just my short time of working in and around the real estate industry with Tourmax over the last 7 years is you definitely see agents doing things, and when you ask them why they do them, they say because I've been doing this way forever and it works.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a time where that doesn't work anymore. And so my objectives in those conversations has always been to be, let's think about another way to do to accomplish the goal that you're trying to accomplish without using this ancient technology or whatever it is that you've been doing because your mentor 25 years ago did it that way and they were rich, you know?
Yeah. Well, we're different now. I mean, my dad was a commercial property manager, and in the 80s, I remember going to his office and he had these, you know, they would type contracts on typewriters and their ledger was on carbon paper. It was a different world. And back then, the real estate agent realtor was the source of knowledge. So, hey, what houses are on the market? I don't know. I'll go ask Mike, the realtor, and he'll tell me. We're not the source of knowledge anymore. You want to know what's for sale in 76028, like you're 30 seconds away from it on your phone, right? So our role has shifted from sources of knowledge to guides. Like that is who we are. That is the service that we give. And you have to market yourself as such, right? We can't position ourselves as something that Zillow can't give you. What we need to position ourselves as, hey, buying a house is hard. There's a million variables and a million things, and to strike out on your own can be daunting, and it'll probably end up costing you money and hurting you. So this is a service that we offer that is probably to your benefit, and here's how that is. And to me, that is such more of an effective approach to somebody than positioning myself as the market authority on anything, because it just doesn't take that much effort to learn the market because the data's all there, right? It's way more about, hey, how can you interpret that data and then make the best decisions possible when you go through it.
Let's get you some more.
Yeah, please. What are we doing?
You tried the small batch select.
I did.
Let's go with the single barrel.
Okay.
It's got the higher rye content. Let's see if you can kind of pick that out and what you think about that. One thing I'm dying to know is, and this has been a concern of mine, just, think about technology.
I like that.
You like that?
Yeah.
So when you think about the advancements in technology, it's scary for some industries because you feel like you're going to one day be replaced by some AI technology, right? And I can see, my job and what I do, whether it be Brandland or Tourmax, that being replaced one day with some robot that can do it way better than me, way quicker, way more efficient, way cheaper. So do you think that there will be real estate agents in 20 years from now?
I do. It's funny you bring that up because analogy photos, right? Like you guys take a lot of photos, you edit them. So my phone, I can go on Instagram and I can put a filter on it and I can make my face shiny or, whatever. So I'm editing photos, right? But I'm editing photos as a guy who doesn't know how to edit photos, right? And so that's where the technology is maybe now for the layman. Like if you gave me a photo and said, edit this, that's what I would do. And so to an extent, it depends on what your goal is. If my goal is to edit a photo to send to my daughter at school, I'd probably not call you and have you do it, right?
Right.
But if it's, hey, I'm gonna be in a magazine and 50,000 people are gonna see, I probably want you to do it, not me. And it's kind of the same thing. I feel like if I'm going to go to the grocery store and pick out steaks, I can probably figure that out without somebody telling me which one's got the best marbling or whatever. But if I'm going to drop the $150,000 down payment on a property, that's an irreversible thing. Once I buy this house, it's mine, right? And I've got to insure it. I've got to maintain it. I will one day want to sell it. It's a very, very large decision. I just don't ever think that is something that you can really, really just kind of automate away.
Yeah.
Now, will our industry look different in 20 years? Absolutely. I think that anybody who tells you otherwise is probably wishing more than actually thinking. But I just don't think you can remove the human element out of it as maybe like auto insurance, where I can go online and I can compare deductibles and pick one, right?
Right.
Or maybe travel. It's a different decision.
Yeah.
Right. And we get compared a lot. Like, well, travel agents, they were here 20 years ago and now they're gone.
Right.
Well, the process and the decision is a very completely different decision. It's way more along the lines, I think, of like, where am I sending my kids to school? Do I go public? Do I go private? Do I move here? Do I like that school? Do I homeschool? Do we do Montessori? It is a very holistic decision and not something that you do in an hour at home. And I think that's why there will be an agent or an authority somewhere that will look to you and be like, hey, let me hold your hand. Let me tell you where to go, because if nothing else, I can simplify this for you.
Yeah.
And keep you from making a really bad mistake.
Yeah. The only thing, I totally agree. I agree that there's just some things you're going to get with a person that you're not going to get with an online service.
Right.
At the same time, things that get me worried about that is the car industry, for example.
Right.
There's this big push of buying your car online and it's delivered to your house, and and now it's not as expensive as depending on what you're buying, it's not as expensive as of an investment as a house. Still somewhat irreversible. Once you get the car, it's yours. All of that. So it's kind of got me curious, because I think the key component is, what is the culture going to look like in 20 years?
Yeah,
now, if it's the same type of people that are around today, I can see a need for that. But if we keep evolving in a direction of, I don't really care as much about quality, I'm just or value. I just want something quick and now, and I need it like right now. And you could see people, younger generations, my kids' age, your kids' age, buying houses from a touch of a button. Just because they don't want to mess with paying someone or mess with, that's just the cool way, the quick way to do it, because they just virtually walk through this house through the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg just made, so they can go see the house themselves. They can see all the, and it's just kind of a scary frontier for some industries. And I'm just, worried that the kind of the creative space is going to be vulnerable to that. The real estate is going to be vulnerable to that. The car industry, all these places that are used to be very much have to be a brick and mortar. Yeah. And now, 20 years from now, I could just buy a house by myself and boom, it's done.
No, I think how many of us that own businesses stay awake at night thinking of stuff like that? Right? Oh my gosh, like, how are you going to automate me away? Right. I think the car thing's a good analogy, but the car is still a one-day purchase, right? Like even 20 years ago, you walk in a dealership at 10, by 3, you're driving away.
Yeah.
Your financing's done if you're lucky. Yeah. Right. To me, buying a house is a whole lot more like buying a jet. So you're going to still have, I remember 20 years ago, Mark Cuban bought a jet on eBay. It was this big thing. It's like, oh my gosh, Mark Cuban spent $4 million or $40 million, whatever it was, on eBay on a jet. Isn't that crazy? But he did it. And there are always going to be those people that are comfortable doing that, right? Because Mark obviously is tremendously talented and smart, and so he has enough confidence to do that.
And enough money to waste.
And enough money that if it goes wrong, it's not that big a deal, right? But I mean, I think there's still going to be a huge section of the population that looks at something that has any complexities to it, specifically if the government stays involved in our housing, which I can't see them ever getting out of, by backing mortgages and doing the things that they do in fair housing. The process is never going to get simplified to a 3 or 4 day transaction. I mean, maybe it could, but even then, when you're talking about something that has as many moving parts and as many issues as far as chain of title, all the way to inspections, to quality, to schools, it's going to be such a thing that requires expertise. I just think the bigger question is, how does that look and how does that get paid, right?
Right.
So you go from, again, the travel agent who maybe was charging 15%, now Expedia is marking you up $6, right?
Right.
They're doing the same thing. It's just streamlined and it's easier. That I feel like is something that may evolve in our industry, where there's still that person there who is providing expertise and guidance, but it's in such a different way that it may be, people like me may do way more volume for way less fee. That I can see.
So what do you think about the open door type? Is it open door?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that approach of like where these brands started to move into these cities, and we started seeing them in the last few years of like, hey, 0% or 1% fee, and it's like the modern day lower fee but lower relationship too. So what do you think of that?
No, I think open door fills a need in the market, and I think there's a place for that model. I really do. It's a good idea. But when people ask me about them, I said the number one thing to remember we call them iBuyers, right? Yeah. Is the iBuyer sits across the table from you. You always have to, despite all their efforts in marketing to make it back. Hey, we're here to make this. It's like Carvana, right?
Yeah.
We're here to make this easy. We're here at the end of the day, they sit across the table from you because they are buying this to make a profit.
Right.
Your best interest is not paramount with them. Their idea is I need to pay X so I can sell for Y so we can keep the lights on. So I do think they service a certain industry where people who maybe don't have the cash or don't have the ability or for whatever reason need a quick sale, that is going to be a very, very good alternative to them. Where 10 years ago, if that was you had to go sell to We Buy Ugly Homes for 65 cents on the dollar, whereas now Open Door will pay you 95 cents on the dollar.
Right.
Really good for them. But I think that model has yet to be proven to work in a down market. We're still haven't seen them. Right now they've never been profitable. They've got great revenue, but they haven't really been able to turn it into long-term viability. I think they will, honestly, but they're going to find that it works for a very specific type of home and a very specific price point. So if have a house in Saginaw built in 2010 and it needs $8,000 in work, Open Door is going to do great on that. If you have a 1940s house in Ridgely, that's probably not going to be the market for them.
Right.
They're taking it right now because they want market share, but it's not going to be where they end up. So I think they'll always have a slice of the market. I just don't think that they'll ever own the market.
Right.
The model doesn't work for every home.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you were talking earlier about the benefit of having a smaller team. By 65 agents, smaller team is relative, of course, but for the competition, the other brokerages in the area, that is a smaller team. Yeah. Now, when you think about that, is that the goal long term, or do you want to still have that, be able to manage that look and touch feel of like being able to cater to each one and know them, truly know them, but get to 125 to 250 agents one day?
That's a good question. We wrestle with that a lot. Yeah. I mean, so I had a meeting a couple years ago with a lady who owns 4 or 5 brokerages in town, and she gave me some great advice. She's like, hey, 50 to 60 is kind of the number. Like after that, the brokerage gets to be too large to where you really can't know your people as well as you'd like to. Yeah. And I've really found that to be true. So we wrestled for a while. How do we scale, right? How do we scale well and not lose our soul? And so our Johnson County office was kind of our first venture in like, can we scale well? And what we learned from, going to Parker County, where we tried to go on our own and make it an extension of our own company, versus in Johnson, we were lucky enough to have Jamie and Cody and Anthony, who are partnered with us down there, and they are heading that office, right? Right. And so
they're taking over that touch point.
Yes. So instead of us trying to do that remotely, or for lack of a term, automate that, it's like, no, we, at the size we are now, we need to replicate kind of what we bring to the table there. And that's something that they've been able to do great. So I think as we grow, in sections, whether that would be a Mansfield or a Keller or whatever, we probably need people there who are just kind of have the same cultural outlook for the company that we do. They buy into what we're doing, and they want to go out there and grow the way that we did. And if that's the case, I think we can keep that smallness and just keep it in pods or sections versus 400 people, piling into our office in Fort Worth.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, that's absolutely, in my conversations with agents that have joined your team, and what they love most about League, just to pat you on the back even further, is they love that feeling that they have a genuine relationship with the team. Like they are known and they know everyone in the office and they feel like they have that connection. And I remember early on where we would record some of those agent bios for your team. And that was one of the most common answers of where they felt like it was, they joined a cheerleading team rather than, opposing, because in real estate offices, it is very much like, you're my competition. So I don't want to really share my tips and tricks on how I go and get clients and how I create leads, because you're going to do the same thing and you'll use it against me. And the thing that's just not the case at League. Like you find agents helping one another, and it's like a very much a team effort. And so whatever you did to create that, kudos, because that's working big time. And
thanks, man.
That's been amazing.
It's been really cool. I've told people before, I was like, when we started this thing 5 years ago, I really thought, like, when we recruited people, it was going to be very much a numbers driven thing. Like, how can you make me more money? How can you help me? What can you do for me? Kind of thing. And it really wasn't. It was way more like pledging a fraternity. Like if you think about that, like, people care how much the dues are. They want to know. And some people more than others. That is number one for most people. But it's not, that alone's not going to get it done for most, especially good agents. That's not enough.
Right.
Just giving me, maxing out my money is not enough for me. So what we kind of learned is like, hey, if you can get a community culture where people truly are from the top down, it's like, hey, we work together. If you got a deal in Lake Weatherford and you've never sold in Lake Weatherford before, I want you to be comfortable throwing that out there. Like, who knows Lake Weatherford? Who knows land leases? Can somebody help me? And somebody else to jump up and say, I've done that. I did one last year. Let me tell you what I did. Here's where I got stuck. Go here. This is the form you're going to need to use. That kind of stuff. I feel like if our initial group of agents modeled that so well, that now it's just kind of what it is, right? And which is really, really great. I mean, I'm thankful for that every day. Yeah, so man. We're really lucky.
Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. I so appreciate you jumping on the podcast.
This was
fun.
Hopefully
you enjoyed the Four Roses experience.
I really did. The second one,
the single barrel
with a little bit less of the sweet.
High rye.
I really did.
So 35% rye content on this on the mash bill. So next time you're in the store, pick up that single barrel and enjoy that. But Four Roses, man, you can't go wrong with them. Not a huge fan of just their standard offering, but everything else, man, is, especially if you can find a single barrel store pick, like a true barrel select, those are amazing as well.
Are those hard to come by just walking into Specs? Or
well, every once in a while Specs will drop one. I think they drop 2 or 3 a year, and so you can find them. You just got to be on the lookout for them and kind of go in regularly and figure that game out. It's a game.
Yeah.
Whiskey hunting is a game. It's a sport. And so, thanks again, man, for jumping on.
Thanks for inviting me. This was cool.
Cheers to you and League. Keep doing what you're doing, man. And I'm excited to be a part of the journey, kind of on the outside looking in.
No, it's been great.